I watched him through the tinted windows of the courthouse, standing on the steps with his attorney, both in tailored suits projecting confidence despite the federal fraud charges hanging over them. Daniel's signature smile, the one that had once charmed investors out of millions and me out of 12 years of my life, was firmly in place as reporters thrust microphones toward him. "My client maintains his innocence and looks forward to clearing his name," his lawyer announced while Daniel nodded solemnly beside him, the picture of a wrongfully accused man. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "You ready for this?" asked Olivia, my best friend and attorney, glancing up from her phone where she'd been reviewing our final preparations. Her dark eyes met mine, concerned but resolute. "Absolutely," I replied, smoothing down my navy pencil skirt and checking my reflection in the car window. A composed, confident woman looked back at me. Not the devastated wife who had discovered bankruptcy papers on our kitchen island just 6 months ago. 6 months of meticulous planning. 6 months of pretending to believe Daniel's elaborate lies about our financial ruin. 6 months of watching him comfort me over the unfortunate loss of our savings, our investments, our future, all while he funneled millions into offshore accounts shared with Vanessa Palmer, his colleague and mistress of 2 years. What Daniel never suspected during those months was that Rebecca Mitchell, the supportive wife who had naively trusted her investment banker husband with all their finances, had been quietly building her own fortune for years. After all, I wasn't just any wife. I was a certified financial advisor with an expertise in forensic accounting that I'd kept carefully separate from our marriage. "He still has no idea what's coming," Olivia murmured, tucking her tablet into her leather portfolio. "The prosecutor just confirmed they're proceeding with the original plea agreement. Daniel thinks he's getting 18 months in a minimum security facility, probation, and keeping all the undiscovered assets." I nodded, gathering my own portfolio containing documents that would soon shatter that delusion. "Then let's not keep justice waiting." As we crossed the courthouse plaza, I felt strangely calm. The rage that had consumed me upon discovering Daniel's betrayal had transformed into something more powerful, cold, calculated determination. Today wasn't about emotional outbursts. It was about consequences, finally finding the man who had expertly avoided them his entire life. The federal courthouse in Boston was imposing by design, all marble columns and granite steps meant to inspire awe and respect for the judicial system. Today, it would serve as the stage for Daniel Mitchell's most public failure. The thought brought a slight smile to my face as Olivia and I passed through security. Inside, the courtroom was already filling with financial reporters, curious lawyers, and former colleagues from Daniel's firm. His high-profile position at Garfield Investments and the dramatic nature of his crimes, fabricating a bankruptcy to hide assets during what everyone assumed was a standard divorce proceeding, had turned this sentencing into the financial district's most anticipated event of the year. I spotted Vanessa immediately, sitting 3 rows behind the defense table, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo that matched her expensive but subdued gray dress, playing the role of supportive colleague, rather than accomplice and lover. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, a flash of unease crossing her face. She still believed I was oblivious to her real relationship with my husband. That misunderstanding would be corrected very soon. Daniel entered from a side door, with his attorney Thomas Walsh, Boston's most expensive criminal defense lawyer. My husband looked confident in his tailored suit, his posture relaxed as he leaned to whisper something to Walsh. He hadn't noticed me yet, sitting quietly beside Olivia on the prosecution side of the courtroom. "All rise!" the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Harmon entered the courtroom, her expression stern as she took her place at the bench. Judge Harmon was known for her intolerance of white-collar crimes and for occasionally rejecting plea agreements she deemed too lenient. Daniel's legal team had been nervous about drawing her for his case, a detail I'd learned through my own carefully cultivated sources at the courthouse. Case number 22 CR 87654, United States versus Daniel Mitchell, the clerk announced, his voice echoing through the now silent courtroom. Judge Harmon adjusted her glasses. I understand we have a plea agreement to consider today. Alexandra Torres, the federal prosecutor, stood. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Mitchell has agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of bankruptcy fraud in exchange for a sentence of 18 months in federal prison and forfeiture of specifically identified assets. And you believe this agreement serves the interests of justice, Ms. Torres? Judge Harmon asked, her tone making it clear she had her doubts. The government believes this agreement appropriately addresses the criminal conduct that we can prove beyond reasonable doubt, Torres replied. Carefully, I watched Daniel's subtle smile, the slight relaxation of his shoulders. He thought everything was proceeding according to plan. His plan. The familiar confidence that had served him so well throughout his career was firmly in place. It was the same self-assurance I had once found attractive, then endearing, and eventually recognized as the dangerous narcissism it truly was. Very well. Mr. Mitchell, please rise for the formal acceptance of your plea and sentencing, Judge Harmon directed. Daniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. Mr. Mitchell, before I accept this plea agreement, I'd like to hear from any victims who wish to address the court regarding the impact of your crimes. I understand your wife is present today. Daniel's head snapped in my direction, finally, noticing me. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in months. He had expected me to be too embarrassed, too destroyed by our financial ruin to show my face publicly. Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing as Olivia remained seated beside me. I would like to address the court. As I walked to the podium, positioned before the judge's bench, I could feel Daniel's eyes following me, trying to read my intentions, assess the threat level. For the past 6 months, I'd played the role he expected, the devastated wife struggling to rebuild after financial collapse. Today, that performance would end. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Harmon nodded. You may proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. I placed my portfolio on the podium, opened it carefully, and took a deep breath. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. Until 6 months ago, I believed I was in a partnership with a man I trusted completely. On February 15th, I came home to find bankruptcy. Papers on our kitchen island and my husband explaining that poor investment decisions had cost us everything. Our savings, our home equity, our retirement accounts. I paused, looking directly at Daniel, whose expression had shifted to one of cautious concern. He told me we would need to immediately sell our home, liquidate what remained of our possessions, and start over. He held me as I cried, promised we would rebuild together, assured me that his mistake had been one of judgment, not character. Judge Harmon was watching me intently now, sensing that this victim impact statement was heading somewhere unexpected. What my husband didn't know was that 3 days earlier, I had received a call from Marcus Reynolds, a financial investigator with Cornerstone Security. Mr. Reynolds had been hired by Richard Grant, the CEO of Garfield Investments, to quietly investigate a pattern of inconsistencies in accounts managed by my husband. During this investigation, Mr. Reynolds discovered something strange. While Daniel was preparing to file bankruptcy paperwork in our names, he was simultaneously moving substantial sums through a complex network of shell companies. Daniel shifted, uncomfortably at the defense table, leaning to whisper urgently to his attorney. Walsh placed a warning hand on his arm, eyes fixed on me. As a certified financial advisor specializing in forensic accounting, I understood exactly what these transactions represented. When I received those bankruptcy papers, I didn't confront my husband. Instead, I began my own investigation, working with Mr. Reynolds and eventually the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I removed several documents from my portfolio, handing them to To the court clerk who distributed copies to the judge, prosecution, and defense. These records show that over the past 2 years, my husband diverted approximately $2 million from our joint assets and various investment accounts into offshore holdings jointly controlled by himself and Vanessa Palmer, his colleague, at Garfield Investments, and, as text messages and hotel receipts also confirm, his mistress since 2020. A murmur swept through the courtroom. In the gallery, Vanessa's face had drained of color. Daniel was now openly glaring at me, all pretense of the concerned husband abandoned. The bankruptcy filing was never necessitated by financial losses. It was a fraudulent attempt to hide assets from me before initiating a divorce. A divorce I discovered he planned to file immediately after the bankruptcy was finalized, based on email communications with his personal attorney. Judge Harmon was reviewing the documents, her expression darkening with each page she turned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ms. Torres, she addressed the prosecutor, were you aware of these additional details and documentation? The prosecutor looked genuinely surprised. No, Your Honor. Our investigation uncovered approximately $7 million in hidden assets. These additional documents appear to reveal substantially more. Because I provided them only this morning, I explained. The final transactions were confirmed late yesterday. Judge Harmon nodded, then turned her attention back to me. Please, continue, Mrs. Mitchell. What my husband failed to consider in his elaborate scheme was that I might have resources of my own. This was the moment I had prepared for, the revelation I had protected for years. While Daniel believed I had entrusted him with managing all our finances throughout our marriage, I had actually maintained separate accounts, investments, and eventually a private family office that he knew nothing about. Daniel's face contorted, with disbelief. This was clearly not information his high-priced defense team had uncovered in their preparation. When I graduated from business school 12 years ago, just before meeting Daniel, my grandmother left me a modest inheritance of $180,000. On the advice of my mentor, Margaret Wilson, I kept these funds completely separate from my marital assets. Over the years, I invested carefully, building that initial sum into substantial holdings now valued at approximately $6 million. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harmon rapped her gavel once, restoring order. Throughout our marriage, Daniel often dismissed my financial acumen, suggesting that my work as an advisor was cute, but not sophisticated enough for managing real money like his. This dismissal actually served me well. It never occurred to him that I might be building my own wealth independently, or that I would have the skills to uncover his fraud. I turned slightly, addressing Daniel directly now. You didn't just betray our marriage with your affair. You didn't just commit fraud against the court with your false bankruptcy. You betrayed the trust of someone who had the expertise to understand exactly what you were doing, every step of the way. Daniel's lawyer was frantically writing notes, likely realizing that their carefully negotiated plea agreement was in serious jeopardy. Your Honor, I continued, turning back to Judge Harmon, I'm not addressing the court today seeking sympathy. I'm financially secure regardless of what happens to the assets my husband attempted to hide. I'm here because the plea agreement before you is based on an incomplete understanding of the scope and premeditation of the fraud committed. I closed my portfolio, my hands steady. The real victims here are the principles of law and trust that form the foundation of both our financial system and the institution of marriage. Daniel Mitchell betrayed both, believing his cleverness would shield him from consequences. I respectfully ask the court to reconsider whether 18 months in a minimum security facility adequately reflects the gravity of these calculated crimes. Judge Harmon studied me for a long moment before speaking. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Your statement has been both informative and concerning. She turned her attention to the defense table. Mr. Walsh, in light of this new information, does Your client wished to proceed with the current plea agreement, understanding that I may be inclined to reject it as insufficient. Walsh stood, visibly flustered. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client regarding these unexpected allegations. Allegations supported by substantial documentation, Judge Harmon corrected, holding up the papers I had provided. But yes, the court will recess for 30 minutes. Ms. Torres, I suggest you and your team review these materials immediately. As the judge left the bench, the courtroom erupted in conversation. Daniel remained seated, staring straight ahead, the muscle in his jaw twitching, a tell I had learned years ago that signaled he was furious but trying to maintain control. Olivia appeared at my side, guiding me back to our seats. That, she whispered, was masterful. Torres looks like Christmas came early, and Walsh looks like he's about to have a coronary. I allowed myself a small smile. Daniel always said, I was too transparent with my emotions to play poker. Turns out I had a better poker face than he ever imagined. Across the courtroom, Vanessa was frantically gathering her things, clearly intending to make a quick exit. She wouldn't get far. The FBI agents positioned near the doors had been briefed about her role in the scheme. My revelation had not only upended Daniel's carefully constructed plan, but had also implicated her as an active participant rather than an unwitting bystander. Rebecca? I turned to find Richard Grant, Daniel's former boss, standing beside our bench. Distinguished and imposing in his bespoke suit, Grant had been a dinner guest in our home countless times over the years. Richard, I acknowledged coolly. His presence at the sentencing suggested he knew more about Daniel's activities than he had let on. I want you to know that Garfield had no knowledge of Daniel's actions. We've been cooperating fully with authorities since irregularities were discovered. His tone was carefully professional, but his eyes conveyed a deeper message. Respect? Perhaps even a hint of admiration. Of course, I replied. Though I imagine the compliance department might be undergoing some restructuring after this. A slight smile touched his lips. Indeed. Actually, I was hoping we might discuss something else. Cornerstone Security mentioned you were instrumental in unraveling this scheme. Garfield is establishing an enhanced fraud prevention division, and we're looking for someone with exactly your expertise to head it. The irony wasn't lost on me, being offered a position at the very firm where my husband had carried out his fraud. That's an interesting proposition, Richard. Why don't you call my office next week? I'll be rather busy for the next few days. He nodded, understanding the dismissal. Certainly. And Rebecca, for what it's worth, I always thought Daniel underestimated you. It seems I did too. As he walked away, Olivia leaned closer. Did Richard Grant just offer you a job while your husband is being sentenced for fraud committed at his firm? Financial world logic, I replied with a shrug. They respect competence above all else, and today I've demonstrated plenty of that. The 30-minute recess stretched to nearly an hour before Judge Harmon returned to the bench, her expression grave. Daniel and his attorney had returned as well, both looking considerably less confident than before. Based on the new evidence presented and after consultation with both parties, the government wishes to withdraw the current plea agreement, Torres announced once proceedings resumed. Is this correct, Mr. Walsh? Judge Harmon asked. Walsh stood reluctantly. Yes, Your Honor. In light of the additional documentation, my client understands that the original agreement is no longer viable. Judge Harmon nodded. Mr. Mitchell, do you understand that withdrawing from this plea agreement likely means additional charges will be filed, potentially resulting in a significantly longer sentence than originally contemplated? Daniel finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. I understand, Your Honor. Very well. This matter is continued for 30 days to allow the government to file a superseding indictment. Mr. Mitchell's bond is revoked, effective, immediately. The evidence suggests substantial flight risk given the previously undisclosed assets and offshore accounts. The sharp rap of the gavel punctuated her decision. 2 U.S. Marshals approached the defense table as Daniel turned to look at me, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. For 12 years, he had seen exactly what he wanted to see. A supportive wife who trusted him implicitly, who lacked the confidence or knowledge to question his financial decisions. The convenient fiction he had created about me had ultimately been his undoing. As the marshals led Daniel away, Olivia squeezed my hand. "Phase 1 complete," she murmured. "Ready for Phase 2? I nodded, watching Vanessa being approached by FBI agents near the exit. "Absolutely. Now we follow the rest of the money." Outside the courthouse, reporters surged forward as Olivia and I emerged. Cameras flashed, questions overlapped in a cacophony of journalistic urgency. Olivia raised a hand, bringing surprising order to the chaos. "My client will make a brief statement," she announced, stepping aside to allow me access to the microphones. I stood straight, my voice clear and steady. Today's proceedings revealed the true extent of the fraud committed by Daniel Mitchell, not just against the bankruptcy court, but against the financial system, his employers, and his family. While I am heartbroken by his betrayal, I am grateful that justice will be served. I want to thank the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, Cornerstone Security, and particularly investigator Marcus Reynolds for their diligence in uncovering the truth. I paused, knowing my next words would travel through Boston's financial circles like wildfire. To anyone who has been deceived or defrauded, whether by a partner, an advisor, or an institution, I want you to know that the truth can be uncovered, and justice can be served. Sometimes the people who underestimate you provide the greatest opportunity to prove your strength. As questions erupted again, Olivia guided me toward our waiting car, expertly deflecting the more aggressive reporters. Inside the vehicle, I finally allowed myself to exhale fully, the tension of the past 6 months releasing in a long, steady breath. "You know this is just the beginning," Olivia cautioned as our driver pulled away from the courthouse. The civil suits, the extended criminal proceedings against both Daniel and Vanessa, the media attention, it won't die down quickly. I gazed. Out the window at Boston's skyline, the financial district where I had built my career, where Daniel had built his lies. "I'm counting on it," I replied quietly. Every financial news outlet covering this case means another person might recognize similar warning signs in their own relationship. Every detail revealed in court shows another young professional that they should maintain financial independence, even in marriage. Olivia studied me for a moment. "This wasn't just about revenge, was it?" "Revenge was part of it," I admitted. "I won't pretend otherwise. But this was also about accountability. Daniel believed the rules didn't apply to him, not the rules of financial regulation, not the rules of our marriage, not even the basic rules of human decency." I turned to look at my friend, the woman who had stood by me through both the public humiliation and the private planning. He thought he could discard me after 12 years, leave me destitute while he enjoyed millions with his younger mistress. He thought I would be too emotionally destroyed to fight back, too financially naive to uncover his scheme. A smile, genuine and unburdened, spread across my face. His greatest mistake wasn't the fraud or even the affair. It was underestimating the woman who had watched him work for 12 years, who had access to every detail of his life, who understood exactly how his mind operated. Daniel forgot the first rule of strategic planning. Never underestimate your opponent, Olivia finished with a grin. Exactly. I opened my portfolio again, revealing the next phase of our plan, the civil suits, the recovery of additional hidden assets, the financial education foundation I plan to establish. Now, let's continue with Phase 2. I believe we have a meeting with Torres in 20 minutes to discuss the extended asset search. As our car navigated through Boston's streets, I felt lighter than I had in months. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibility. Daniel had believed he was writing the end of our story with his bankruptcy fraud and planned divorce. Instead, he had merely set the stage for my new beginning, a beginning built on the strength he never knew I possessed and the fortune he never knew I'd built. Within 48 hours of Daniel's sentencing hearing, the story had exploded across financial news outlets. CNBC ran a segment titled, "The Banker's Wife Who Knew Too Much," while the Wall Street Journal published a detailed analysis of how I had uncovered the fraud. My phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from reporters, former colleagues, and surprisingly, other women who suspected their spouses of financial deception. I never wanted to be the public face of spousal fraud. I told Olivia as we sat in her office, reviewing the latest set of documents from the FBI's expanded investigation. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her downtown Boston law firm, illuminating stacks of financial records spread across her conference table. "Fame finding you was an inevitable side effect," she replied, sliding a Boston Globe article toward me. The headline read, "Financial Advisor Uncovers Husband's Multi-million-dollar Fraud Scheme. Experts call it unprecedented." I skimmed the article, noting they had managed to find an old photo of Daniel and me at a charity gala, both smiling brightly into the camera. It felt like looking at strangers. At least they got the facts right, I conceded, pushing the paper aside. "What's the latest from Torres?" Olivia picked up her tablet. "The prosecutor's office has expanded the investigation to include 3 additional offshore accounts they discovered in the Caymans. And," she paused dramatically, "they've frozen Vanessa Palmer's personal accounts after finding evidence. She was more than just a beneficiary. Apparently, she helped structure some of the more complex transfers using contacts from her previous position at Goldman." I wasn't surprised. During my own investigation, I had noticed patterns in the financial maneuvers that didn't align with Daniel's typical strategies. He was clever with money, certainly, but some of the offshore structuring had seemed beyond his usual methods. "What about the Cape Cod property?" I asked, referring to the luxury vacation home I'd discovered Daniel had purchased through a shell company 18 months earlier. A discovery that had initially tipped me off that something was amiss in our finances. "Still working on connecting it definitively to their scheme, but we're close," Olivia assured me. "Marcus is analyzing the purchase records today." Marcus Reynolds had become an invaluable ally over the past months. The financial investigator who had first alerted me to irregularities in Daniel's accounts had continued working with us even after the initial case was built, his expertise proving crucial as we uncovered the full extent of the fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus himself. "Found something. Coming to Olivia's office now. Big." I showed the message to Olivia, who immediately cleared a space among the documents. He doesn't use big lightly. 20 minutes later, Marcus strode into the conference room, his perpetually rumpled appearance belying his sharp intellect. He carried his battered leather messenger bag, which I knew contained a laptop powerful enough to run complex financial analysis programs. "Rebecca, Olivia," he greeted us with a nod, already pulling out his computer. I was digging into the property records for the Cape House when I found something unexpected. He turned the screen toward us, showing a complex diagram of financial transactions. The money for the initial down payment didn't come directly from the offshore accounts you already identified. It came from here. He pointed to a box labeled Meridian Trust. "I've never heard of Meridian Trust," I said, studying the diagram. "Neither had I," Marcus replied, "until I traced it back to its formation. Guess who the primary beneficiary is?" Olivia leaned forward. "Vanessa?" "No." Marcus looked directly at me. "Caroline Mitchell." The name hit me like a physical blow. "Daniel's mother?" Marcus nodded. "The trust was established in 2019, right around the time Daniel first met Vanessa. It appears to be a vehicle specifically designed to hide assets not just from you, Rebecca, but from potential regulatory oversight at Garfield Investments. I sat back, processing this new information. Caroline Mitchell, my mother-in-law of 12 years, had always been coolly polite to me, maintaining a careful distance while clearly favoring her only son. We had spent countless holidays together, exchanged birthday gifts, even vacationed together in the south of France 5 years ago. And all this time, she was complicit, I whispered, the realization blooming like a dark flower. She helped him hide the money. It appears so, Marcus confirmed. And there's more. The trust isn't small. We're talking about approximately $12 million in assets. Some of it appears to be family money, but a substantial portion matches transfers from accounts Daniel controlled over the past 3 years. Olivia was already making notes. This changes the scope of the case significantly. If Caroline Mitchell knowingly participated in hiding assets that were part of a bankruptcy fraud, she could face charges herself, I finished. The thought was simultaneously shocking and vindicating. Caroline had always treated me with a subtle condescension, as though I were merely a temporary fixture in her son's prestigious life. I need to call Torres immediately, Olivia said, reaching for her phone. This could impact how they structure the superseding indictment against Daniel. As Olivia stepped out to make the call, I studied Marcus's diagram more closely. How did you find this? We've been investigating for months. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The Cape Cod property had an unusual insurance rider, coverage specifically for a collection of rare first edition books valued at over $800,000. That seemed inconsistent with Daniel's interests, so I dug deeper. The collection is registered to Caroline Mitchell, but housed at the Cape property. Once I had her name, I started looking for financial connections, and Meridian Trust emerged. My mother-in-law's involvement explained certain inconsistencies that had bothered me throughout my investigation. Moments when Daniel's financial movements seemed to have assistance beyond his own capabilities, transactions that occurred when I knew he was elsewhere. Caroline had been a financial advisor herself before retiring 15 years ago. She would have had both the knowledge and connections to help establish the complex network of hidden accounts. Olivia returned, her expression serious. Torres wants all the documentation immediately. She's considering adding Caroline Mitchell to the indictment and is requesting a meeting with us tomorrow morning. Did she say anything about Vanessa's cooperation? I asked. Apparently, Ms. Palmer is suddenly very eager to assist the investigation, Olivia replied with a knowing look. Facing potential federal charges has a way of inspiring collaboration. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vanessa, who had been perfectly comfortable helping Daniel defraud me in the bankruptcy court, was now ready to turn on her accomplices to save herself. The loyalty between conspirators was proving predictably fragile. I should go home and prepare for tomorrow, I said, gathering my papers. Home was now a sleek condominium in Back Bay, purchased under my own name with a portion of my separate funds. A place untainted by memories of Daniel. Rebecca, Marcus called as I headed for the door. There's one more thing you should know. His expression was unusually hesitant. The timing of the Meridian Trust's creation coincides with another event in Daniel's life. He updated his life insurance policy, increasing the coverage to $5 million with Caroline as the sole beneficiary. You were removed completely. Another betrayal, another careful preparation for a future that didn't include me. I absorbed the information with a strange detachment, as though we were discussing a case study rather than my own life. Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate your thoroughness. My voice sounded calm, even to my own ears. The time for emotional reactions had passed. Now was the time for strategic thinking. Outside Olivia's office building, Boston's financial district hummed with midday activity. Men and women in business attire hurried past, their faces set in expressions of purposeful determination. How many of them, I wondered, were living with secrets like Daniel's? How many were victims like I had nearly been? My phone rang as I waited for the valet to bring my car around. Richard Grant, Daniel's former boss and the CEO of Garfield Investments. "Rebecca?" He greeted me warmly when I answered. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Richard. What can I do for you?" "I've been following the developments in Daniel's case. The news about Caroline Mitchell's involvement is troubling." I wasn't surprised he already knew. Richard's network of information was legendary in Boston financial circles. Yes, it was unexpected. I wanted to renew my offer regarding the Fraud Prevention Division. After discussing with the board, we'd like to make it a more comprehensive position, Chief Risk Officer, with a seat on the Executive Committee. Your handling of this situation has demonstrated exactly the kind of vigilance and expertise we need. The offer was flattering and strategically valuable. Taking a C-suite position at the very firm where Daniel had committed his fraud would be a powerful statement. Yet something about it felt uncomfortably like allowing my identity to remain defined by Daniel's crimes. I appreciate the offer, Richard. I'd like some time to consider it. As you can imagine, recent developments have given me much to think about. Of course, he responded smoothly. The position remains open for you. We're prepared to be quite generous with compensation and autonomy. After ending the call, I found myself not immediately driving home, but heading toward the harbor. I parked near the waterfront and walked along the promenade, watching boats move across the bay while my mind processed the day's revelations. Caroline Mitchell's involvement changed everything. This wasn't just Daniel acting alone or with his mistress. This was a family conspiracy that had been developing for years. How long had they been planning to discard me? Had Caroline always viewed me as temporary, coaching her son on how to protect family assets from his expendable wife? My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "It's Vanessa. We need to talk. Please." I stared at the message, a surge of anger mixing with curiosity. What could Vanessa Palmer possibly have to say to me that would be worth hearing? Yet the investigator in me recognized an opportunity. Vanessa, facing criminal charges and clearly frightened, might reveal information we hadn't yet uncovered. I called Olivia immediately. "Vanessa just texted me, asking to meet." "Absolutely not," Olivia responded without hesitation. "Not without legal representation present, and certainly not without understanding her motives. This could be an attempt to manipulate evidence or testimony. Or she could have information about Caroline's involvement that would strengthen the case," I countered. Remember, Vanessa was with Daniel for 2 years. She may know details about their plan that haven't emerged yet. After some negotiation, Olivia agreed to a controlled meeting at her office the following morning before our appointment with Torres. "But I'll be present for every word, and we're recording everything," she insisted. Agreed. I texted Vanessa with the details, half expecting her to balk at the formal setting. Instead, she responded immediately with acceptance. That evening, alone in my condominium, I found myself standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Boston skyline, a glass of Cabernet in hand. The city lights blurred slightly as I allowed myself, just for a moment, to feel the full weight of what had transpired. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building what I thought was a partnership, a shared life with shared dreams. All while Daniel had been constructing an elaborate exit strategy, preparing to leave me with nothing while he enjoyed millions with a younger woman. And his mother had helped him. The realization still stung, despite my outward composure. It wasn't just the betrayal by Daniel. I had processed that months ago when I first discovered the fraud. It was the recognition that his entire family had viewed me as disposable, had actively participated in planning my financial destruction. My phone rang again, displaying my sister Kate's name. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hey sis," she said immediately. "Just checking in. You're all over the financial news again today. Kate lived in Chicago with her husband and 2 children, physically distant, but emotionally my closest family. She had been my unwavering support throughout the ordeal, offering both sympathy and practical advice. Caroline was involved, I said without preamble. Daniel's mother helped him hide the money. Kate's sharp intake of breath was audible. That cold, calculating. She didn't finish the sentence. Are you okay? I'm fine. The response was automatic, professional. Then, realizing this was Kate, I allowed myself more honesty. Actually, I'm angry, not just at Daniel. I've been angry at him for months. I'm angry at myself for not seeing the Mitchell family for what they were from the beginning. Becca, stop. Kate's voice was firm. You couldn't have known. These people are practiced deceivers. Daniel fooled an entire investment firm and his clients for years. Caroline has apparently been playing the respectable widow while helping her son commit federal crimes. You didn't miss obvious signs. They were expert manipulators. Her words provided some comfort, though the lingering sense of having been thoroughly deceived remained. There's a meeting with Vanessa tomorrow, I told her, changing the subject. Slightly. She reached out, wants to talk. The Mistress. Kate's tone sharpened. What could she possibly have to say that's worth your time? Information, potentially. She was with Daniel for 2 years and clearly involved in the financial scheme. If she's looking to cut a deal with prosecutors, she might have valuable details about Caroline's role. Kate was quiet for a moment. Just be careful. These people have shown they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to protect themselves and hurt you. After we hung up, I returned to my contemplation of the cityscape, thinking about the meeting tomorrow. What would it be like to sit across from the woman who had not only had an affair with my husband, but actively helped him plan my financial ruin? Could I maintain the professional detachment that had served me so well in the courtroom? Morning came with a sense of resolute purpose. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit that projected confidence and authority, a subtle armor for the eye. Confrontations ahead. By 8:30 a.m., I was seated in Olivia's conference room, reviewing notes while waiting for Vanessa to arrive. Recording equipment is set up, Olivia confirmed, adjusting the small device on the center of the table. Remember, we're here to gather information, not to give it. Let her talk, and don't reveal anything about our strategy or the full extent of what we know. I nodded, appreciating my friend's protectiveness. I'll follow your lead. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Olivia's assistant showed Vanessa Palmer into the conference room. My first thought was that she looked markedly different from the composed woman who had sat in the courthouse just days earlier. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, and her designer clothes replaced by a modest blouse and slacks. The transformation seemed calculated, an attempt to appear vulnerable and sincere. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, her voice softer than I remembered from our brief courtroom encounter. "Ms. Palmer," Olivia took control immediately. "Before we begin, I want to be clear that this meeting is being recorded and that anything you say may be shared with federal prosecutors. Are you certain you want to proceed without your own legal representation?" Vanessa nodded. "My lawyer knows I'm here. This isn't about legal strategy, it's about..." She glanced at me, setting the record straight. "Very well." Olivia gestured to a chair across from us. "Please, sit." Vanessa perched on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "First, I want to say I'm sorry, Rebecca. I know that doesn't mean anything, but I need to say it." I remained silent, studying her. Up close, she appeared younger than her 32 years, with a nervous energy that seemed at odds with the confident financial professional who had helped orchestrate a multi-million-dollar fraud. "When I met Daniel," she continued, filling the silence, "he told me his marriage was already over in everything but name. He said you were separating, that you had grown apart but were maintaining appearances until certain financial matters were resolved. She looked down at her hands. I believed him. Yet you helped him establish offshore accounts and move millions of dollars without his wife's knowledge, Olivia noted coolly. That seems inconsistent with believing you were entering a relationship with someone in a transparent separation process. Vanessa flushed. It wasn't all at once. At first, it was just, he said he needed to protect some assets because you were being unreasonable about the division of property. Then it became more structuring accounts, creating the shell companies. By the time I realized the full extent of what we were doing, I was already implicated. And Caroline Mitchell, I asked, speaking for the first time. When did you become aware of her involvement? Surprise flickered across Vanessa's face. You know about Caroline? We do, Olivia confirmed without elaborating. Please answer Rebecca's question. Vanessa exhaled slowly. Caroline was involved from the beginning. She and Daniel had been planning this for at least a year before I came into the picture. The Meridian Trust was her idea. She had connections with a financial firm in Geneva that specialized in discreet wealth management. What was the ultimate plan? I pressed, leaning forward slightly. Beyond hiding assets from me, what were they trying to accomplish? Daniel was positioning for a major career move, Vanessa revealed. He had been approached by a private equity firm in Singapore. The plan was to finalize the bankruptcy, complete your divorce with you receiving minimal assets, then resign from Garfield and relocate internationally. The hidden funds would be accessible offshore, beyond the reach of U.S. regulators or divorce settlements. The calculated nature of the plan struck me anew. Not just financial fraud, not just infidelity, but a complete exit strategy from his entire American life, with me left behind, financially devastated. And your role in this future? Olivia asked pointedly. Vanessa's gaze dropped again. I was supposed to join him in Singapore after a suitable interval. Caroline objected to this part of the plan. She thought I was a liability, too inexperienced to be trusted with knowledge of their financial arrangements. That's why. She hesitated. Why what, Ms. Palmer? Olivia prompted. That's why they started excluding me from certain meetings about 3 months ago. Daniel became secretive about some accounts, and Caroline suggested I might be more useful staying in Boston to manage certain aspects of their portfolio. Her expression hardened slightly. They were planning to cut me out too, eventually. I realized that after Daniel's arrest, when I couldn't access accounts I had helped establish. The Mitchell family pattern was becoming clearer. Use people until they were no longer useful, then discard them. Daniel had done it to me, and he and Caroline had been preparing to do the same to Vanessa. What specifically do you know about Caroline's active participation? I asked, focusing on the most legally relevant information. I have emails, Vanessa said simply. Communications between Caroline, Daniel, and their contact in Geneva, explicitly discussing how to structure assets to avoid detection during bankruptcy proceedings. Caroline also personally handled the rare book collection transaction. It was her idea to use the books as a vehicle to move physical assets that wouldn't appear in standard financial records. And you're willing to provide these emails to federal prosecutors? Olivia asked. Vanessa nodded. I've already copied them. My lawyer is using them as part of my cooperation agreement negotiation. Why are you telling us this? I finally asked the question that had been foremost in my mind since receiving her text. You could provide this information directly to the prosecution without involving me. Vanessa met my eyes directly for the first time. Because I wanted you to know that I was deceived too. Not to the same extent as you, and I'm not claiming moral equivalence. But Daniel and Caroline were manipulating all of us, and she hesitated. I thought you should be prepared for what Caroline might do next. What do you mean? My pulse quickened slightly. 2 weeks before Daniel's arrest, Caroline liquidated substantial portions of her personal investment portfolio, approximately $43 million. The funds haven't reappeared in any accounts we used previously. She's planning something, and given how ruthless she's been so far... You think she might take more direct action against Rebecca? Olivia finished, her expression grave. I don't know, Vanessa admitted, but Caroline sees Rebecca as the sole obstacle between her son and freedom. She blamed you entirely when the initial plea agreement fell apart. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes, with Vanessa providing detailed information about specific transactions, accounts, and conversations. Throughout, I maintained my composure, taking notes and asking precise questions while keeping my emotional reactions carefully controlled. When Vanessa finally left, promising to have her lawyer forward the email evidence later that day, Olivia turned to me with concern. We need to take the threat from Caroline seriously. If she's liquidated assets and blames you for Daniel's current situation, I'll be careful, I assured her, though my mind was already cataloging security measures I should implement. Let's focus on our meeting with Torres first. This new information about Caroline's international connections changes the scope of the case significantly. As we gathered our materials to head to the prosecutor's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Need to speak with you urgently. New information about Caroline Mitchell's whereabouts. I showed the message to Olivia, a sense of foreboding settling over me. The Mitchell family had already proven their willingness to orchestrate elaborate schemes for financial gain. What might Caroline do to protect her only son from the consequences of their shared crimes? The walls of careful planning I had built around myself suddenly seemed less impenetrable. For months, I had been the one uncovering secrets, the one bringing hidden truths to light. Now, with Caroline Mitchell's machinations still partially in shadow, I faced a disquieting role reversal. I was potentially being hunted by someone as methodical and determined as myself. Call him back immediately, Olivia instructed, her voice tense. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Caroline Mitchell boarded a private flight to Geneva yesterday morning, Marcus explained, his voice crackling through the speakerphone in Olivia's car as we headed toward the federal prosecutor's office. The flight was arranged through a Shell, company not previously connected to the Mitchell family. I only found it because I was specifically looking at all private aviation departures with female passengers matching her description. Olivia and I exchanged worried glances. Is she coming back? I asked. Unknown, Marcus replied. But here's what's concerning. Before departure, she emptied a safe deposit box at Boston Trust Bank. The box was registered under yet another LLC, but bank security footage confirms it was Caroline accessing it. According to my source at the bank, she spent nearly 40 minutes in the private room with the box contents. Any idea what was in it? Olivia asked, skillfully navigating Boston's morning traffic. No visual confirmation, but the box size suggests documents, jewelry, perhaps digital storage. What's most interesting is that 2 hours after visiting the bank, Caroline met with a man identified as Victor Krasny. The name meant nothing to me, but Olivia's sharp intake of breath indicated recognition. Victor Krasny has connections to several financial crime families from Eastern Europe, Marcus continued. He operates primarily as a facilitation specialist, helping wealthy individuals change identities, establish new lives in countries without extradition treaties, that sort of thing. The implications were disturbing. You think Caroline is planning to help Daniel flee if he makes bail on the new charges, I stated, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. That's my assessment, Marcus confirmed. The timing is too coincidental. She liquidates assets, meets with Krasny, then immediately flies to Switzerland, a country known for its banking secrecy. We need to alert Torres immediately, Olivia said, accelerating slightly. This information could be crucial in keeping Daniel in custody pending trial. There's one more thing, Marcus added. Before leaving, Caroline made a large cash withdrawal from an account not previously flagged in our investigation. $50,000. Cash is virtually untraceable. The unspoken concern hung in the air. What would Caroline Mitchell do with untraceable funds? And was I potentially a target? I've taken the liberty of arranging for enhanced security at your condominium building, Marcus said, addressing my unvoiced worry. A private security detail will be monitoring the premises for the next 72 hours, until we have a better understanding of Caroline's intentions. Thank you, Marcus, I replied, grateful for his foresight. Forward everything you have to Torres. We're meeting her in 15 minutes. After ending the call, Olivia and I rode in tense silence for several blocks. Finally, she spoke. Are you all right? This has escalated beyond financial fraud very quickly. I gazed out at Boston's familiar streets, trying to process how my life had transformed so dramatically in 6 months. From successful professional in a seemingly solid marriage to the target of what appeared to be an international flight risk scheme, possibly worse. I'm managing, I answered truthfully. But I'm concerned about what Caroline might be willing to do. The depth of deception goes far beyond what I'd imagined. We'll request a restraining order as part of today's meeting, Olivia assured me. And I want you to stay at my place, for a few days at least until we know Caroline's precise whereabouts and intentions. The offer was tempting. The thought of returning alone to my condominium, even with enhanced security, felt suddenly vulnerable. I appreciate that. Let's see what Torres says first. Alexandra Torres's office at the federal courthouse was a model of precise organization, much like the prosecutor herself. Files were arranged in perfect stacks on her desk, case notes color-coded and tabbed. She greeted us with professional courtesy, her sharp eyes taking in our tense expressions immediately. You have new information, she observed, gesturing for us to sit. Significant developments, Olivia confirmed, quickly summarizing what we had learned about Caroline Mitchell's involvement, her meeting with Krasny, and her sudden departure to Switzerland. Torres took rapid notes, her expression darkening. This supports our decision to seek a superseding indictment naming Caroline as a co-conspirator. We were already heading in that direction based on the Meridian Trust documentation, but this elevates the urgency. What about Daniel's custody status? I asked, getting to the heart of my immediate concern. He has a bail hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning, Torres replied. With this new information about potential flight assistance from his mother, we'll argue strenuously against any release. Judge Harmon is unlikely to grant bail given these circumstances. She turned her attention to the emails Vanessa had provided through her attorney. These communications are extremely damning. Caroline explicitly discusses hiding assets from bankruptcy proceedings and divorce settlements. In one exchange, she actually refers to you, Mrs. Mitchell, as the temporary wife situation. The casual cruelty of the phrase stung, even after everything else I had learned. To Caroline, I had never been family, merely an inconvenient situation to be managed, and eventually eliminated. What about Caroline herself? Olivia pressed. Can you issue an arrest warrant given her flight to Switzerland? Torres's expression turned grimly practical. Switzerland doesn't extradite for financial crimes, generally speaking. If she remains there, arrest would be complicated. However, we're preparing documentation for Interpol and Swiss authorities regarding potential conspiracy charges that might fall outside typical financial crime exemptions. And in the meantime, I asked, should we be concerned about Rebecca's safety? Torres didn't dismiss the question, which I found more alarming than reassuring. Given the lengths to which the Mitchell family has gone to protect their assets and freedom, prudent security measures would be advisable. I can arrange for U.S. Marshals to provide protection if you feel directly threatened. Let's start with the restraining order, I decided, not yet ready to accept such an extreme measure as marshal protection. And I'll be staying with Olivia, temporarily. As we concluded the meeting, Torres handed me her card with her personal cell number written on the back. Call immediately if anything concerning occurs, day or night. This case is a priority for our office. Outside the federal building, the spring air had turned chilly, dark clouds gathering overhead in a fitting metaphor for my circumstances. Olivia checked her watch. We should go directly to my place, get you settled. I can have my assistant pick up some essentials from your condo. I nodded, suddenly exhausted by the weight of revelations and their implications. The adrenaline that had carried me through the morning was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Olivia's townhouse in Beacon Hill was a warm, inviting space that reflected her personality. Elegant but comfortable, with bookshelves lining the walls and modern art brightening the spaces between. She showed me to her guest room, a peaceful, blue sanctuary with a bay window overlooking a small courtyard garden. Make yourself at home, she encouraged. I have a conference call I need to handle, but it shouldn't take more than an hour. There's tea in the kitchen, or something stronger if you prefer. Left alone, I sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself a moment to process the morning's developments. Caroline Mitchell's actions suggested a level of determination and resource I hadn't fully appreciated. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about freedom, about escaping consequences, perhaps even about revenge. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Just checking in, how did the meeting go? I hesitated, not wanting to alarm my sister unnecessarily. Complicated, I typed back. Staying with Olivia for a few days as a precaution. We'll call you tonight with details. Another text arrived, this one from Richard Grant. Hearing concerning rumors about Caroline Mitchell. Please confirm you're safe. The Boston financial community's grapevine was evidently functioning at peak efficiency. I sent a brief acknowledgement, then set my phone aside, needing a reprieve from the constant communication. I moved to the window seat, watching raindrops begin to spatter against the glass. The peaceful courtyard below stood in stark contrast to the turmoil of my situation. How had my life become this complex web of legal proceedings, hidden assets, and potential threats? 6 months ago, my biggest concern had been whether to accept a position on the board of a local financial literacy nonprofit. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Olivia appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. Call ended early, she explained, handing me one of the steaming cups. Thought you might appreciate this. Thank you. I accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping my hands around its warmth. Olivia settled into an armchair near the window. Torres just called. They've located Victor Krasny. He's still in Boston, staying at the Four Seasons. They're putting surveillance on him, hoping he might lead them to any associates of Caroline's, still in the area. That's something, at least. I sipped my tea, chamomile with a hint of honey, exactly how I preferred it. Olivia's attention to such details was one of the many reasons I valued her friendship. Rebecca, Olivia began, her tone shifting to something more personal than professional. I know you've been incredibly strong throughout this entire ordeal, but it's all right if you're not feeling strong right now. This situation has escalated in ways none of us anticipated. The simple permission to acknowledge vulnerability cracked something in my carefully maintained composure. I keep thinking about all the family gatherings, the holidays with Caroline, I admitted. 12 years of sharing meals, exchanging gifts, even traveling together. All while she viewed me as temporary, disposable. Was I really so blind, Olivia? Did I miss obvious signs that these people were simply tolerating me until Daniel decided to move on? Olivia considered her response carefully. I don't think you missed anything. The Mitchells excel at presentation, at creating the image they want the world to see. Daniel built his career on being trustworthy, on making clients and colleagues believe he had their best interests at heart. Caroline perfected the role of the respectable widow and dedicated mother. They didn't just fool you, they fooled everyone. Not everyone. I countered. Vanessa knew the truth, at least about the fraud, if not about their intentions towards her. Richard Grant apparently had suspicions, which is why he hired Marcus in the first place. Vanessa was actively participating in the deception, Olivia reminded me, and Grant only became suspicious after noticing financial irregularities that his position gave him access to. You didn't have that advantage. Daniel deliberately kept you away from the family finances while making you believe he was handling everything responsibly. Her logic was sound, but the sense of having been thoroughly deceived remained a persistent ache. I built a separate financial life because something in me didn't fully trust the arrangement, I reflected. Some instinct made me maintain independence even while believing in our partnership. What does that say about our marriage all along? It says you're intelligent and self-protective, even when you weren't consciously aware you needed to be, Olivia replied. That intuition saved you from financial devastation. Trust it now. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The screen displayed unknown number. Normally, I would let such calls go to voicemail, but given the current circumstances, I answered cautiously. Rebecca Mitchell? A man's voice, unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. Who is this? I kept my tone neutral, though my pulse had quickened. Someone with information you might find valuable, about Caroline Mitchell's intentions. Olivia, seeing my expression change, moved closer, her own concern evident. I'm listening, I said, putting the call on speaker so Olivia could hear. Not over the phone, the caller replied. Meet me at the Boston Public Garden, by the George Washington statue. 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead before I could respond. Absolutely not, Olivia said immediately. This has trap written all over it. Or it could be someone who worked with Krasny looking to make a deal, I countered, though without much conviction. The cloak and dagger approach seemed needlessly dramatic for a genuine informant. Olivia was already on her phone dialing, Torres, we need to report this immediately. If someone connected to Caroline or Krasny is reaching out to you directly, that's a significant escalation. Torres answered on the second ring, her response immediate and decisive after hearing about the call. Stay exactly where you are. I'm sending agents to secure the location and to monitor the meeting point. We might be able to identify whoever made the call. Within 20 minutes, 2 FBI agents arrived at Olivia's townhouse, setting up a perimeter and establishing surveillance protocols. Agent Diana Chen, the lead investigator assigned to the financial crimes aspect of Daniel's case, took my statement personally. The caller's approach is consistent with intimidation tactics we've seen in similar cases, she explained, her manner professional but kind. The demand to come alone, the public location that allows for easy escape, classic methods to create fear and uncertainty. So this wasn't a genuine offer of information? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. It's highly unlikely, Agent Chen confirmed. More probably, this was either an attempt to lure you into a vulnerable position or simply to frighten you, to demonstrate that you can be reached despite protective measures. The implications were chilling. Do you think Caroline ordered this? It's consistent with the escalation pattern we're seeing, Chen acknowledged. But we can't confirm her direct involvement yet. Our team at the garden might give us more information. If someone shows up at the designated meeting spot, we'll be able to identify and possibly apprehend them. As evening approached, the agents established a rotating security protocol, with one remaining inside Olivia's home while the other monitored the perimeter. Olivia worked quietly at her dining room table, preparing documents for Daniel's bail. Hearing the next morning, while I tried unsuccessfully to focus on a book from her shelf. My phone rang again around 7 p.m., Torres calling with an update. We had a visual on a man matching Krasny's description near the Washington statue, she reported. He appeared to be waiting, checking his watch periodically. When you didn't appear, he made a call, then left the area. We followed him back to the Four Seasons but didn't have sufficient cause for an arrest based solely on his presence in a public park. So it was a setup, I said, the confirmation bringing a strange mix of validation and increased anxiety. Almost certainly, Torres agreed. We're expanding surveillance on Krasny and his known associates. In the meantime, Judge Harmon has approved the emergency restraining order. Caroline Mitchell is now legally prohibited from contacting you directly or through intermediaries. The protection of a legal document seemed woefully inadequate against someone who had already demonstrated willingness to violate multiple federal laws, but I thanked Torres for the update nonetheless. After ending the call, I found myself drawn back to the window seat, watching as darkness settled over Beacon Hill. The rain had intensified, streaming down the glass in rivulets that distorted the courtyard lights below. Somewhere in this city, or perhaps already overseas, Caroline Mitchell was orchestrating moves against me, determined to protect her son and their shared assets at any cost. Olivia appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her features. You should try to rest. Tomorrow's bail hearing will be intense, and you need to be at your sharpest. I know, I acknowledged, but sleep feels impossible right now. She hesitated, then said, Marcus sent over something interesting. The FBI obtained Caroline's phone records through an emergency warrant. In the 3 days before she left for Switzerland, she made multiple calls to a private security firm called Blackridge Solutions. What kind of security firm? I asked, though I suspected the answer wouldn't be reassuring. They specialize in reputation management and crisis resolution for high-net-worth individuals, Olivia explained, making air quotes around the euphemisms. Their public services are legitimate, but there have been allegations about their more discreet offerings. The implication hung in the air between us. You think Caroline hired them to handle me in some way? I think we need to be prepared for any possibility, Olivia replied carefully. The FBI is investigating the connection, but in the meantime, your safety is the priority. Agent Chen has arranged for additional protective measures for the courthouse tomorrow. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and plagued by dreams, in which I was being pursued through Boston's financial district by shadowy figures who always remained just out of clear view. I woke before dawn, feeling unrested but determined to face the day's challenges. By 8 a.m., we were in Olivia's car, heading toward the federal courthouse, flanked by an FBI escort vehicle. The morning news on the radio included a brief mention of Daniel's bail hearing, noting the expanded investigation now included his mother, who was reportedly traveling in Europe. The courthouse security had been noticeably enhanced since our last visit. Agent Chen met us at a private entrance, bypassing the main security checkpoint where a small crowd of reporters had gathered. Judge Harmon has agreed to a closed hearing given the security concerns, Chen explained as she escorted us through the building. Only essential personnel will be present. The courtroom, when we entered, was indeed sparsely populated. Torres was already at the prosecution table, reviewing documents with an associate. 2 U.S. Marshals stood at attention near the judge's bench. The defense table remained empty. Daniel and his attorney had not yet arrived. Mr. Walsh filed a motion this morning requesting that his client appear via video link, citing security concerns of his own, Torres informed us as we took our seats. Judge Harmon denied it. She wants Mitchell physically present. 10 minutes later, Daniel was led into the courtroom by additional marshals. He wore the standard issue detention center uniform rather than one of his tailored suits, the orange fabric a stark contrast to the formal courtroom setting. He looked diminished somehow, his confident posture replaced by a guarded stiffness. His eyes found me immediately, his expression shifting through surprise, anger, and then settling into something more calculated. He leaned toward Walsh, whispering urgently as his attorney attempted to calm him with placating gestures. Judge Harmon entered, and the proceedings began with formal identification of all parties present. Torres quickly took center stage, outlining the prosecution's opposition to bail in clear, compelling terms. Your Honor, new evidence has emerged indicating a coordinated effort to facilitate the defendant's potential flight from justice, she argued, systematically presenting the information about Caroline Mitchell's activities, her meetings with Krasny, and her departure to Switzerland. Furthermore, Torres continued, there have been concerning developments suggesting potential witness intimidation. She detailed the anonymous call I had received, the surveillance at the Boston Public Garden, and the connections to Black Ridge Solutions. Walsh attempted to counter these arguments, describing them as speculative and circumstantial, emphasizing Daniel's ties to the community and his previously clean criminal record. But even to my untrained ear, his arguments sounded hollow, against the weight of evidence Torres had presented. Throughout the proceedings, I maintained eye contact with Judge Harmon, answering her occasional direct questions with calm precision. I studiously avoided looking at Daniel, though I could feel his gaze boring into me whenever Torres referenced my role in uncovering the fraud. When both sides had presented their arguments, Judge Harmon took only a brief recess before returning with her decision. The court finds that no combination of conditions would reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant as required or the safety of the community, she stated firmly. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody, pending trial. Daniel's composure finally cracked. He stood abruptly, prompting the marshals to move closer. "This is outrageous!" he exclaimed, his broadcaster's voice echoing in the nearly empty courtroom. "Your Honor, my wife has manipulated this entire process. She's been planning this for years, building her secret fortune while pretending to trust me with our finances. If anyone committed fraud, it was Rebecca." Judge Harmon's expression hardened. "Mr. Mitchell, control yourself or you will be removed from this courtroom. Your accusations against Mrs. Mitchell are not relevant to this bail hearing and are contradicted by the extensive documentation before this court." Walsh placed a restraining hand on Daniel's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Daniel shook him off, his attention fixed entirely on me now. "You think you've won," he said, his voice lower but intensity undiminished. "But you have no idea what you're up against. My mother has resources you can't imagine, connections you don't understand. This isn't over, Rebecca." "Remove the defendant," Judge Harmon ordered sharply, and the marshals moved forward to escort Daniel from the courtroom. As he was led away, Daniel called back over his shoulder. "Ask her about the offshore accounts in Singapore. Ask her how long she's been planning this." The courtroom door closed behind him, cutting off any further outbursts. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. "Mrs. Mitchell," Judge Harmon addressed me directly, "are you aware of any basis for the defendant's accusations regarding accounts in Singapore?" "None whatsoever, Your Honor," I replied truthfully. "My financial holdings have been fully disclosed to federal investigators. They are legitimate investments established prior to my marriage, maintained separately throughout, and properly reported on all tax filings." Judge Harmon nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Very well. This hearing is adjourned. Ms. Torres, I expect to be kept apprised of any further security concerns regarding witnesses in this case." As we exited the courtroom, Torres joined us in the corridor. "Daniel's outburst was revealing," she observed. "His specific mention of Singapore connects directly to what Vanessa Palmer told you about his planned career move there. It suggests he's still operating under the assumption that those plans might somehow proceed. Or he's trying to create confusion, cast doubt on Rebecca's credibility," Olivia suggested. "Either way, his mention of Caroline's resources and connections is concerning," Torres continued. "It aligns with our assessment that she may be actively working to undermine this case and potentially target Rebecca directly." Outside the courthouse, we were met by Agent Chen. "We've identified the caller who contacted you yesterday," she reported. Facial recognition from the garden surveillance matched to a known associate of Blackridge Solutions. Former military, specializes in what they euphemistically call information gathering. "Can you arrest him?" Olivia asked. "Not yet," Chen admitted. "The call itself, while concerning, doesn't constitute a chargeable threat. We're building a case connecting him to Blackridge and potentially to Caroline Mitchell, but it takes time. Time we may not have if Caroline is actively targeting Rebecca," Olivia pointed out with barely contained frustration. Chen's expression remained professional but sympathetic. "We're doing everything legally possible. In the meantime, the protection detail remains in place, and we've added surveillance at key locations. Mrs. Mitchell will have the full resources of the FBI ensuring her safety." As we drove back to Olivia's townhouse, I found myself mentally reviewing Daniel's courtroom outburst, trying to decipher whether it had been genuine rage or calculated performance. After 12 years of marriage, I had thought I knew every facet of his personality, every tell that indicated his true emotional state. Yet now I questioned even that basic understanding. "What's our next move?" I asked Olivia, needing to focus on action rather than uncertain analysis. "We continue building the case," she replied decisively. "Torres is pursuing the superseding indictment against both Daniel and Caroline. Marcus is tracking financial movements that might indicate Caroline's plans. And you and I remain both the key witness and potential target," I finished for her. Olivia glanced at me, her expression softening slightly. "Yes, but you're also the person who brought all of this to light. Don't forget that you've already won the most important victory. You protected yourself from their scheme when they thought you were defenseless." As we pulled into Olivia's driveway, my phone chimed with a new email notification. The sender's address was unfamiliar, but the subject line sent a chill through me. "Rebecca, you should know what Caroline is really planning. Attachment included." I showed the screen to Olivia, who immediately shook her head. "Don't open it. This could be malware, a tracking attempt, anything. Or it could be legitimate information," I countered. "Someone inside Caroline's circle who's decided to break ranks." We compromised by forwarding the email to Agent Chen, who promised to have the FBI's cyber team examine it securely. "Within an hour," she called back with their findings. "The attachment appears to be genuine financial documentation," she reported. "It shows transfers from Caroline Mitchell to several entities we hadn't previously identified, including one particularly concerning payment to a known facilitator of false identification documents. She's preparing escape routes," I concluded. "Not just for Daniel," Chen clarified. "The documentation includes preparations for 3 individuals, Daniel, Caroline, and a third person identified only by the initial V. Vanessa," Olivia and I said simultaneously. Despite her cooperation with prosecutors, it appears Ms. Palmer may still be included in the Mitchell's contingency plans, Chen confirmed. Or at least she was when these arrangements were made. "Who sent the email?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since we received it. "That's where things get interesting," Chen replied. "The email was routed through multiple servers to obscure its origin, but our technical team believes it originated from within Blackridge Solutions itself." "Someone inside the security firm is informing on Caroline?" Olivia asked skeptically. "It's possible," Chen allowed. "More likely, this is coming from someone Caroline hired who's decided the risks of her plan outweigh the potential rewards. We're continuing to investigate, but the information itself appears legitimate and valuable." After ending the call, Olivia and I sat in her living room, processing this latest development. Rain continued to fall outside, creating a soothing backdrop to our troubled thoughts. Why would someone inside Blackridge risk exposing Caroline's plans? I wondered, aloud. These firms survive on client confidentiality. Perhaps even professional fixers have limits, Olivia suggested. If Caroline is planning something truly extreme, Someone might have decided to create a record of having warned authorities to protect themselves from potential accessory charges. The thought was disturbing. What exactly had Caroline Mitchell asked Blackridge to do that would make even a professional risk exposure? My phone rang again, Kate calling for our promised update. As I explained the day's developments to my sister, I found myself struggling to convey the surreal quality of my current existence. Court hearings, FBI protection, anonymous threats, mysterious leaks of information. "I'm coming to Boston," Kate declared firmly after listening. "You shouldn't be going through this alone." "I'm not alone," I assured her, glancing at Olivia, who was reviewing the forwarded email documents. "I have Olivia, legal protection, even FBI agents. And you have the kids and your job. You can't just drop everything." "Watch me," Kate countered with typical older sister determination. "Mark can handle the kids for a few days, and I have vacation time saved. I'm booking a flight tonight." Despite my protests, I felt a wave of relief at the thought of having Kate's steady presence nearby. She had always been my anchor in difficult times, practical and unflappable, where I tended toward careful analysis and strategic thinking. "Fine," I conceded. "But you stay at a hotel, not here. I don't want you anywhere near potential trouble." "Agreed," Kate said, clearly pleased to have won the argument. "I'll text you my flight details. In the meantime, promise me you won't take any unnecessary risks." After hanging up, I joined Olivia in reviewing the leaked documents more thoroughly. They painted a disturbing picture of Caroline Mitchell's contingency planning, not just financial arrangements for escape, but what appeared to be a coordinated strategy to discredit me publicly before disappearing. "She's planning to launch some kind of smear campaign," Olivia observed, pointing to payments to a crisis management firm specializing in aggressive reputation defense. "Probably hoping to create enough doubt about your credibility to undermine the case against Daniel, even if they ultimately flee." The Mitchells' determination to destroy me, financially, reputationally, perhaps even physically, was becoming increasingly clear. What had begun as a scheme to hide assets had evolved into a multifaceted attack on every aspect of my life. Yet as I studied the documents, I felt an odd calm settling over me. Caroline Mitchell might have resources, connections, and a lifetime of manipulating situations to her advantage. But I had something she consistently underestimated: the truth, meticulously documented and increasingly public. "Let her try," I said quietly, closing the file. "The more desperately they fight, the more they reveal who they truly are." Outside, the rain finally began to ease, a pale evening light breaking through the clouds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, perhaps even new revelations. But for this moment, in the safety of Olivia's home, I allowed myself to recognize how far I had come from the stunned, betrayed wife who had discovered bankruptcy papers 6 months ago. Caroline Mitchell might be plotting from Switzerland. Daniel might be seething in federal custody. But I was still standing, still fighting, and, most importantly, still one step ahead. Kate arrived the following morning, striding through the arrival gate at Logan Airport with her characteristic energy, rolling suitcase in tow and determination etched on her features. Despite the heaviness of the situation, seeing my sister's familiar face brought the first genuine smile to my lips in days. "You look terrible," were her first words as she embraced me, the blunt assessment delivered with undeniable affection. "Good to see you too," I replied, returning the hug with unexpected emotion. There was something grounding about Kate's presence, a connection to my life before it had become a complex web of federal investigations and potential threats. Agent Ramirez, one of the FBI officers assigned to my security detail, stood a discreet distance away, scanning the terminal with practiced vigilance. I had insisted on meeting Kate personally despite Olivia's concerns about public appearances, unwilling to delegate this small normalcy to security personnel. "Is that my personal bodyguard?" Kate asked quietly as we walked toward the exit, nodding subtly in Ramirez's direction. Part of the security detail, I confirmed. They're being thorough. Kate's expression sobered. This is real, isn't it? When you explained everything on the phone, it felt almost cinematic. The kind of thing that happens in movies, not to my pragmatic financial advisor sister. Trust me, I've had that same thought daily, I admitted, as we reached the car where Agent Chen waited at the wheel. After brief introductions, we pulled away from the curb, Chen navigating skillfully through morning airport traffic. "Where are we going?" Kate asked, noticing we weren't heading toward downtown Boston where her hotel was located. "Secure location first," Chen explained professionally. "Standard protocol after collecting family members. We'll complete basics, security briefing, then transport you to your accommodations." The secure location turned out to be a nondescript federal building near Government Center. Inside, we were escorted to a conference room where Olivia and Marcus already waited, along with Alexandra Torres and a man I didn't recognize. "Rebecca," Torres greeted me, then turned to my sister. "You must be Kate. I'm Alexandra Torres, lead prosecutor on this case." She gestured to the unfamiliar man. "This is Special Agent Dominic Vega, who's coordinating our response to the escalating security situation." Vega was tall and solid, with the watchful demeanor of someone who assessed risks professionally. "Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Collins," he acknowledged. Us both. I apologize for the formality, but recent developments necessitated this meeting. "What developments?" I asked, immediately alert. Torres nodded to Marcus, who opened his laptop. At 3:17 this morning, Caroline Mitchell made a large transfer from a previously unidentified account in Liechtenstein to Blackridge Solutions, he explained, turning the screen to show us the transaction records. Simultaneously, two operatives, known to work with Blackridge, entered the United States on Canadian passports: Alexander Novak and Julian Reed, both former military contractors with specialized extraction experience. "Extraction?" Kate questioned, glancing at me with concern. "A euphemism for forcible removal of individuals from one location to another," Vega clarified, "often employed in corporate espionage or high-stakes custody disputes." "You think they're here for Daniel," I concluded, the pieces clicking into place. "Caroline is planning to break him out of federal custody." "That's one possibility," Torres acknowledged. "The other is that they're here for you, Mrs. Mitchell." The blunt assessment sent a chill through me. For what purpose? I've already testified. The evidence exists independently of me now. "Revenge," Vega suggested matter-of-factly, "or leverage against the federal investigation. Either way, the timing of Caroline's transfer and these individuals' arrival is concerning enough that we've elevated your security status to high risk." Kate reached for my hand under the table, her grip tight with worry. "What does that mean practically?" Olivia asked, ever focused on concrete implications. "Mrs. Mitchell needs to relocate immediately to a fully secured safe house," Vega explained. "Limited external communication, no public appearances, and continuous protection until we've neutralized the potential threat." "For how long?" I questioned, the prospect of effectively disappearing from my life feeling suddenly overwhelming. "Impossible to predict," Vega admitted. "Potentially until Caroline Mitchell is in custody or the trial concludes." "Months?" Kate asked, her voice rising slightly. "Unlikely to be quite that long," Torres interjected, her tone more measured. "We're actively pursuing Caroline through international channels. The evidence connecting her to these contractors could provide the leverage we need with Swiss authorities, who might be more cooperative regarding conspiracy to commit violence than they typically are with financial crimes." I took a deep breath, processing the dramatic escalation of my circumstances. 6 months ago, I had been a successful financial advisor with a seemingly solid marriage. Now, I was being told to enter protective custody due to potential threat from my mother-in-law. "What about my sister?" I asked, suddenly concerned for Kate's safety. "If these people are targeting me, could they go after her to draw me out?" Vega nodded, appreciating the legitimate question. That's why we intercepted Ms. Collins at the airport. We recommend she return to Chicago immediately, with protective surveillance until the situation is resolved. No, Kate stated flatly. I came to support my sister, and I'm not leaving her to face this alone. Kate, I began, alarmed at the thought of her being caught in this dangerous situation. It's not up for debate, Becca, she interrupted firmly. If you're going into hiding, I'm coming with you. Mark and the kids are safe in Chicago. These people have no reason to go after them if both of us are securely located elsewhere. Vega and Torres exchanged glances, clearly not having anticipated this complication. It's unusual to include extended family in protective arrangements, Vega noted. Then consider this an unusual case, Kate replied, her expression making it clear this was a hill she was prepared to die on. After some discussion, a compromise was reached. Kate would be permitted to stay in Boston under protective surveillance, though not at the same safe house where I would be relocated. We would have secure means to communicate and limited opportunities for in-person meetings. We should move quickly, Vega advised after the details were settled. The sooner Mrs. Mitchell is at the secure location, the better. As the meeting concluded, Marcus approached me privately. There's something else you should know, he said, quietly. It might be nothing, but Vanessa Palmer has gone missing. Missing, I repeated, immediately concerned despite my complicated feelings toward Daniel's mistress. She missed a scheduled meeting with prosecutors yesterday, and when agents went to her apartment, there were signs of hasty departure. Drawers left open, personal items missing, but furniture and larger possessions left behind. Could she have fled voluntarily? I asked, considering the possibility that Vanessa had decided to protect herself by disappearing. Marcus shrugged. Possibly. Or she could have been the Mitchells' first target. The implication was disturbing. If Caroline had arranged for Vanessa's forcible extraction as punishment for her cooperation with authorities, it suggested a level of ruthlessness even beyond what we had suspected. Have the FBI search for any properties connected to Victor Krasny, I suggested, remembering the man Caroline had met before departing for Switzerland. If they're holding Vanessa somewhere in preparation for extracting Daniel, it would likely be a secure location with connections to their network. Marcus nodded. Good thinking. I'll pass that along to Vega immediately. Within 2 hours, I had packed essential items from Olivia's guest room and was being transported in an unmarked SUV with tinted windows to what Agent Chen described only as a secure property outside the city. Kate had been escorted to a different vehicle headed for her own protected accommodations after extracting a promise from Vega that we would be allowed to speak daily. As Boston's familiar skyline receded in the rear window, I felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. The Mitchells had escalated beyond financial fraud and divorce planning to what appeared to be organized criminal activity. The scale of their response to being caught suggested I had uncovered only the surface of their deception and crimes. The safe house turned out to be a modest colonial-style home situated on several acres of wooded property approximately 40 minutes outside Boston. From the outside, it appeared to be an ordinary upper-middle-class residence, though I quickly noted the security cameras discreetly positioned around the perimeter and the reinforced entry points. We maintain several properties like this for witness protection and similar situations, Agent Chen explained as she escorted me inside. This one has the advantage of being both secluded and easily defensible. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, furnished simply but adequately, with a well-equipped kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a small office space with secure communications equipment. 2 agents would remain on site at all times, with additional personnel monitoring the surrounding area. You'll have limited internet access, Chen continued, showing me a laptop on the dining table. The connection is secured but restricted to prevent location tracking. Cell service is blocked within the house itself. All communication goes through our secured lines. How long do you truly expect this to be necessary? I asked directly. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. Truthfully, It depends on how quickly we can locate Caroline Mitchell and these contractors. Best case scenario, days. Worst case, weeks, I finished for her. We're doing everything possible to resolve this quickly, she assured me. The Bureau has made this case a priority, especially given the international dimensions and the potential threat to a cooperating witness. After Chen completed the security briefing, I was left alone in what would be my bedroom for the foreseeable future. The space was impersonal but comfortable. Neutral bedding, basic furnishings, a small attached bathroom. I unpacked my limited belongings, trying to inject some personalization into the sterile environment. My phone had been replaced with a secured device that contained none of my previous contacts or personal information. The only numbers programmed into it were for the security team, Olivia, Torres, and a special line to reach Kate at her protected location. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the surreal quality of my circumstances. How had Caroline Mitchell's determination to protect her son and their wealth escalated to this extreme? The woman I had known for 12 years, who had hosted holiday dinners and sent thoughtful birthday gifts, was now apparently willing to employ mercenaries rather than see Daniel face justice. The secured phone rang, startling me. It was Olivia, calling with an update. Torres just filed the superseding indictment, she reported without preamble. Both Daniel and Caroline are now formally charged with bankruptcy fraud, conspiracy, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. Given the new evidence about the security contractors, they've added conspiracy to commit kidnapping as well. Kidnapping? I repeated, the clinical legal term somehow making the threat feel more concrete. Has Daniel been informed about these new charges? Not yet. They're moving him to a higher security facility today, given the extraction concerns. Walsh apparently tried to argue against the transfer, but Judge Harmon shut him down immediately. And Caroline? Any progress locating her in Switzerland? Nothing definitive, Olivia admitted. But Interpol has issued a red notice based on the new charges, which gives international authorities greater ability to detain her if located. After ending the call, I found myself drawn to the window, looking out at the wooded property surrounding the safe house. Somewhere beyond those trees, Caroline Mitchell was orchestrating moves against me, employing people with skills and resources I could barely comprehend. The disparity should have been terrifying, yet I felt an unexpected calm. Throughout my life, I had relied on careful analysis and strategic thinking to navigate challenges. This situation, while extreme, still responded to those same approaches. Caroline might have access to mercenaries and offshore accounts, but I had uncovered her initial deception through methodical investigation. That same patience and attention to detail would serve me now. I was startled from my thoughts by a knock at the bedroom door. Agent Ramirez stood there, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Mitchell, there's been a development. Agent Vega is on his way to brief you personally, but I wanted to give you advance notice. Vanessa Palmer has been found." "Is she alive?" I asked immediately, fearing the worst. "Yes, but..." He hesitated. "She's been injured. She was discovered at a private airfield outside Boston, apparently left behind when something interrupted what seems to have been a planned departure." Relief mingled with concern. "What happened? Did she escape?" "Unknown at this point. She's being treated at a secure medical facility and hasn't regained consciousness. Agent Vega will have more details when he arrives." 40 minutes later, Vega sat across from me at the dining table, his tablet displaying photographs that made my stomach clench. Vanessa, bruised and unconscious on a stretcher being loaded into an ambulance. The preliminary assessment suggests she was forcibly taken from her apartment approximately 36 hours ago, Vega explained clinically. She appears to have resisted, resulting in these injuries. Medical examination confirms blunt force, trauma consistent with a struggle, followed by chemical sedation. "Why was she abandoned at the airfield?" I asked, trying to make sense of the sequence of events. That's where things get interesting, Vega replied. The private jet registered to the shell company that booked the flight was scheduled to depart for a small airport near Geneva. However, shortly before boarding, the pilot received an anonymous tip that federal authorities were en route to the airfield. It appears Novak and Reed chose to flee without their captive rather than risk apprehension. Who provided the anonymous tip? I wondered. We're still investigating that, Vega admitted. It may have been someone at the airfield who became suspicious, or potentially even someone within Blackridge itself. These security firms operate in legally ambiguous territory. Kidnapping crosses a line that might make some operatives uncomfortable. The theory aligned with the earlier leaked email about Caroline's financial movements. Is there any indication they were planning to take me next? Or was this related to the potential extraction of Daniel? Based on equipment found in their abandoned vehicle, both scenarios were in play, Vega replied grimly. They had surveillance photos of your condominium building, Olivia's townhouse, and several other locations you've frequented. They also had detailed information about the federal detention center where Daniel is being held. The methodical approach was chilling. These were not amateurs acting on impulse, but professionals executing a carefully planned operation. Caroline Mitchell had essentially commissioned a private extraction team to target both her former daughter-in-law and potentially free her son from federal custody. Is Vanessa expected to recover? I asked, my thoughts turning to the other, victim of the Mitchells' desperation. The prognosis is positive, though it may be several days before she's able to provide a statement, Vega confirmed. We have agents with her around the clock, both for her protection and to be present when she regains consciousness. And the contractors? Any leads on their current whereabouts? We believe they've left the immediate area, but not the country. Airport and border security has been alerted. Their options for international travel are limited, given that we now have their identities flagged. After Vega departed, I found myself unable to remain still, pacing the confined space of the safe house while my mind processed the implications of these developments. Vanessa's abduction confirmed the extreme measures Caroline was willing to take. The fact that professional contractors had surveillance photos of my regular locations validated the decision to move me to a secure facility. Yet questions remained. Who had tipped off the pilot about federal authorities approaching the airfield? Who had sent the anonymous email revealing Caroline's financial transfers? Was there a fracture within the network Caroline had assembled, or perhaps even within the Mitchell family itself? The secured phone rang again, Kate this time, calling from her protected location. Agent Vega just left, she said without preamble. He told me about Vanessa. This is insane, Becca. These people are actually dangerous criminals, not just financial fraudsters. It seems that way, I agreed, hearing the strain in my sister's voice. You know what terrifies me most? Kate continued. You could have been completely ruined by their original plan, and we would never have known the truth. If you hadn't maintained separate finances, if you hadn't had the skills to uncover the fraud, Daniel and Caroline would have successfully stolen everything, left you destitute, and simply disappeared to Singapore with no consequences. The observation was sobering. How many others had been victims of similar schemes without the resources or knowledge to fight back? How many had simply accepted the narrative presented by more powerful, more connected individuals? But they didn't succeed, I reminded her, as much for my own benefit as hers. And now they're facing federal charges. That will be very difficult to escape, even with their resources. Promise me you won't take any chances, Kate insisted. Stay in that safe house, follow the agent's instructions, let the FBI handle Caroline and her hired thugs. I promise, I assured her, touched by her concern. This will be resolved through legal channels. Caroline has already made the critical error of escalating from financial crime to potential kidnapping and violence. She's given the authorities far more to work with than they had initially. After ending the call, I found Agent Chen in the kitchen, preparing coffee. Is there any way I can access financial records from here? I asked. Specifically, I'd like to examine Caroline Mitchell's known accounts for patterns that might help identify additional holdings. Chen looked hesitant. This is a protection detail, Mrs. Mitchell, not an investigation. Your role at this point is primarily to remain safe while we locate the threats. Agent Chen, I replied evenly. I'm a forensic accountant who uncovered a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that federal investigators initially missed. I understand Caroline Mitchell's financial patterns better than anyone. If there are clues to her current location or future plans in those records, I'm the most qualified person to identify them. Her expression suggested internal debate, weighing security protocols against practical advantages. I'll speak with Agent Vega, she finally conceded. If he approves, we can establish a secure connection to certain financial databases. By that evening, I had a workstation set up in the small office of the safe house with restricted but functional access to financial records related to the Mitchell case. The work provided welcome focus, a return to the methodical analysis that had been my professional foundation for years. Hours into my review, a pattern began to emerge. Caroline's financial movements showed regular transfers to entities in 3 specific locations: Geneva, Singapore, and somewhat surprisingly, San Jose, Costa Rica. The first 2 aligned with known Mitchell connections: the Swiss accounts Vanessa had mentioned, and the Singapore career opportunity Daniel had been positioning for. But Costa Rica was new, not previously flagged in any of our investigations. I called Torres on the secured line, eager to share this potential lead. There's a property holding company in Costa Rica that's received 4 substantial wire transfers from Caroline Mitchell over the past 18 months, I explained. The company name, Horizon Vistas, doesn't appear in any of our previous documentation. What makes you think it's significant? Torres asked, though I could hear interest in her voice. The timing and amount of the transfers, I explained. The first payment, approximately $650,000, was made exactly 2 weeks after Daniel first met Vanessa, according to the timeline we've established. Each subsequent transfer occurred at a major milestone in their fraud preparation: when the Meridian Trust was established, when the bankruptcy planning began, and finally, a transfer of $1, $2 million the day before Caroline left for Switzerland. A backup plan within the backup plan, Torres mused. Costa Rica has limited extradition with the United States, particularly for financial crimes. Exactly, I confirmed. And property ownership there can be structured through corporations that obscure the beneficial owner. I think Caroline may have been establishing a fallback option even while planning the Singapore relocation, perhaps without Daniel's knowledge. Good work, Mrs. Mitchell, Torres said with genuine appreciation. I'll have our international team focus on Costa Rica immediately. If we can identify specific properties connected to Horizon Vistas, it might give us leverage with local authorities. The next morning brought news from multiple fronts. Vanessa Palmer had regained consciousness and provided a preliminary statement confirming she had been forcibly taken from her apartment by 2 men matching Novak and Reed's descriptions. She reported overhearing them discuss a secondary extraction, scheduled for the following day, which she believed referred to either Daniel or myself. Simultaneously, the FBI's international team had identified a luxury villa in Costa Rica's Central Valley region owned by Horizon Vistas. Satellite imagery showed recent construction activity and security improvements consistent with preparation for long-term occupancy. Most significantly, Caroline Mitchell had been positively identified by Swiss authorities entering a private banking facility in Geneva that morning. While they didn't have grounds to detain her under Swiss law, they had established surveillance and were coordinating with Interpol regarding the international warrants. We're closing the net, Vega reported during his morning briefing at the safe house. Mitchell knows we're tracking her financial movements now, which limits her options considerably. What about the contractors? I asked, still concerned. about Novak and Reed's whereabouts. Still in wind, but we believe they've moved west, Vega replied. There was a potential sighting at a hotel in upstate New York yesterday evening. If they're attempting to leave the country, they'll likely try crossing into Canada, where border security is less intensive than airports. A strange sense of anticipation had settled over me, the feeling of pieces moving into final position after months of careful play. Caroline Mitchell had constructed an elaborate escape plan, but each component was now being systematically identified and neutralized. Later that day, Olivia arrived at the safe house with a thick folder of documents requiring my review: financial, declarations for the upcoming trial, affidavits regarding my separate assets, and various legal filings related to the expanded federal case. Daniel's attorney has requested another meeting with Torres, she informed me as we worked through the paperwork. Reading between the lines, I think Walsh is fishing for a plea deal now that the charges have expanded to include Caroline. Daniel would turn against his mother? I asked, genuinely surprised, despite everything I had learned about my husband's character. Olivia shrugged. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Daniel is facing potentially decades in federal prison. If he can provide valuable information about Caroline's activities and locations of additional assets, Torres might be willing to recommend a reduced sentence. The thought of Daniel betraying Caroline as readily as he had betrayed me was somehow both fitting and sad. A family built on manipulation and deception ultimately collapsing under the weight of those same flaws. Has he actually offered any information yet? I asked. Not specifically, Olivia admitted, but Walsh indicated his client has significant insights into Caroline's financial structures that weren't previously disclosed. It's lawyer speak for my client is ready to make a deal. As evening approached, I found myself standing at the safe house window again, watching the failing light filter through the surrounding trees. Despite the restrictions of my current circumstances, a strange sense of peace had settled over me. After months of uncovering layers of betrayal and deception, the truth was finally emerging in its entirety. Caroline Mitchell had spent decades cultivating an image of respectability while teaching her son the art of manipulation and self-serving calculation. Together, they had planned not just to divorce me, but to destroy me financially, to erase 12 years of partnership as though they had never existed. When that plan was exposed, they had escalated to increasingly desperate measures: offshore accounts, identity preparations, hired contractors, and ultimately, violence. But each escalation had only entangled them further in a web of their own making, transforming a potentially simple bankruptcy fraud case into an international criminal investigation. The secured phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Torres, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "We've got her," she said without preamble. Swiss authorities just took Caroline Mitchell into custody as she attempted to board a private flight to Costa Rica. She was traveling on a fraudulent passport under the name Catherine Morris. Relief flooded through me. What about the contractors? Still at large, but without their employer, their motivation to continue the operation is significantly diminished. Novak and Reed are mercenaries, not loyalists. With Caroline in custody and her assets increasingly frozen, they're more likely to focus on their own escape than completing any mission against you. "So it's over?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it could be resolved so relatively simply. "Not entirely," Torres cautioned. "There will still be extradition proceedings, trials for both Caroline and Daniel, asset recovery processes, but the immediate threat to your safety has been significantly reduced. Agent Vega believes we can transition you from the safe house to a less restrictive protected status within the next 48 hours. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Kate to share the news. Her relief was palpable even through the secured line. "Does this mean we can go home soon?" she asked hopefully. "Not immediately," I cautioned, "but the situation is improving." Caroline's in custody, and they believe the contractors are no longer an active threat. Thank God, Kate breathed. When this is all over, you're coming to Chicago for a long visit. The kids miss their aunt, and I need to keep an eye on you for a while. The offer brought unexpected tears to my eyes, a simple reminder of normal life, of family connections unrelated to deception and criminal proceedings. I'd like that, I managed, suddenly overwhelmed by the prospect of a future beyond the Mitchell case. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months, the constant undercurrent of fear finally diminishing. Caroline's capture represented more than just a reduction in physical threat. It symbolized the beginning of true resolution, the final collapse of the elaborate deception that had nearly destroyed me. Morning brought additional developments. Daniel, apparently recognizing the shifting dynamics following his mother's arrest, had formally offered to cooperate with prosecutors. According to Torres, who called early with the update, he was prepared to provide detailed information about additional offshore accounts, property holdings, and the full extent of their planned disappearance to Singapore. It's a fairly transparent attempt to save himself now that Caroline's been apprehended, Torres noted, her tone suggesting professional skepticism. But the information could be valuable in ensuring full asset recovery and strengthening the case against both of them. What kind of deal is he seeking? I asked, curious about Daniel's expectations. His attorney has proposed a 15-year sentence with possibility of parole after 8 in exchange for full cooperation, Torres replied. We haven't responded yet. Given the expanded charges and Caroline's apprehension, his bargaining position isn't particularly strong. Later that morning, Vega arrived at the safe house for an in-person briefing. His typically stern expression had softened slightly, suggesting positive developments. We've located Reed, he announced without preamble. Canadian authorities apprehended him attempting to cross the border near Buffalo last night. He had approximately $50,000 in cash and multiple false identification documents. And Novak? I asked, concerned about the remaining contractor. Still unaccounted for, but we believe he's separated from Reed and is likely pursuing independent escape routes. With both his employer and partner now in custody, his priority will be self-preservation, not completing any contracted mission. Vega's assessment seemed logical, yet I still felt a lingering unease about the unaccounted-for operative. When can I return to normal life? I asked directly. We're implementing a phased transition, Vega explained. Tomorrow, you'll be moved to a secure apartment in Boston with continued protection, but more freedom of movement. Assuming no new threats emerge, we'll gradually reduce security measures over the coming weeks. The prospect of returning to something resembling normalcy was both appealing and slightly intimidating. After months of focusing exclusively on the Mitchell case, first the investigation, then the legal proceedings, and finally the protective measures, the idea of resuming regular life felt almost foreign. What happens next with Caroline? I asked, focusing on the practical aspects of resolution. Extradition proceedings have already begun, Vega replied. Given the nature of the charges, particularly the conspiracy to commit kidnapping, Swiss authorities are being cooperative. We expect her to be returned to U.S. custody within 2 to 3 weeks. As Vega departed, I found myself contemplating what form justice would ultimately take in this case. Daniel and Caroline would likely spend significant time in federal prison. Their assets would be largely forfeited or returned to defrauded parties. Their reputations, built over decades of careful image management, were irreparably damaged. Yet the true justice, I realized, lay not in their punishment, but in the preservation of my own future. The Mitchells had planned to leave me financially, devastated, socially humiliated, and emotionally broken. Instead, I had emerged with my assets intact, my professional credibility enhanced, and a newfound confidence in my own resilience. The secured phone rang once more, Marcus calling with what he described as interesting final developments. The FBI forensic team analyzing Caroline's electronic devices found communication between her and Daniel from 3 years ago, he explained, his voice suggesting he'd uncovered something significant. The exchanges explicitly discuss long-term strategy for wealth preservation in anticipation of eventual marital dissolution. 3 years ago? I repeated, the timeline jarring against my understanding of our marriage. 3 years ago, Daniel and I had celebrated our 9th anniversary with a trip to Napa Valley. We had discussed potentially starting a family, renovating our Boston townhouse, planning for our future together. Or so I had believed. It appears the planning began well before Daniel met Vanessa, Marcus confirmed. She wasn't the catalyst for their scheme, merely a convenient addition to plans already in motion. The revelation settled over me like a physical weight. Daniel's betrayal hadn't been the result of falling for a younger woman or a midlife crisis of purpose. It had been calculated years in advance, a strategic decision made while still presenting himself as a committed husband. The emails also confirm your suspicion about Costa Rica, Marcus continued, mercifully shifting to more practical matters. Caroline had indeed purchased the property as a backup plan, apparently without Daniel's knowledge. Her communications with the property management company indicate she was preparing it as her personal residence, not a shared location. She was planning to abandon Daniel too, I concluded, the final piece of the Mitchell family dynamics falling into place. Once he served his purpose in the financial scheme, she would have disappeared to Costa Rica with the bulk of the assets, leaving him in Singapore with whatever portion she deemed sufficient. That's my reading as well, Marcus agreed. In one email to the property manager, she specifically notes that the home should be prepared for single occupancy with occasional guests, not a family residence. The pattern of deception extended. In all directions, it seemed. Caroline manipulating Daniel while he manipulated me, while Vanessa was manipulated by both. A perfect closed system of calculated betrayal with each participant convinced they understood the complete picture. The following day, as promised, I was relocated to a secure apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. The building had enhanced security features and agents maintained a presence, but the constant direct supervision was reduced. Kate was permitted to visit freely, and we spent that first evening together in the apartment, sharing dinner and a much-needed glass of wine. "What comes next for you after all this is truly over?" she asked as we sat by the window overlooking the city lights. The question was deceptively complex. For so long, my focus had been entirely reactive, discovering the fraud, building the case, navigating the escalating threats. The concept of proactive planning for my own future felt almost novel. "Professionally, I have options," I replied, considering the possibilities. Richard Grant's offer to head Garfield's fraud prevention division is still open. Several other firms have made similar overtures, apparently impressed by my ability to uncover the Mitchell scheme. "But what do you want?" Kate pressed, knowing me well enough to recognize when I was analyzing rather than soul-searching. I gazed out at Boston's familiar skyline, the city that had been my home for more than a decade. "I'm thinking of accepting a visiting lecturer position at MIT's Sloan School," I said, giving voice to an idea that had been forming gradually. Teaching forensic accounting and financial fraud detection to graduate students, helping others recognize the warning signs I initially missed. Kate smiled, clearly approving. "From personal trauma to educational mission. That sounds exactly like you, Becca, finding the constructive application of a painful experience." "And I'm considering establishing a foundation," I continued, the concept growing clearer as I articulated it. "Providing financial education and legal support for people facing potential fraud in divorce proceedings. So many don't have the resources or knowledge I had to protect themselves." "The Rebecca Mitchell Foundation for Financial Justice," Kate suggested, raising her wine glass in a mock toast. "I like it. From victim to advocate to systemic changemaker." The characterization felt right, a progression from personal damage control to broader impact. Daniel and Caroline had attempted to use financial systems as weapons. I could help transform those same systems into protective structures for the vulnerable. As night settled over Boston, I found myself contemplating the strange journey that had brought me to this point. The bankruptcy papers that had appeared on my kitchen island 6 months ago had been intended to begin my financial destruction. Instead, they had triggered a sequence of events that ultimately strengthened my position, clarified my purpose, and revealed capacities for strategic thinking and resilience I hadn't fully recognized in myself. Caroline Mitchell had called me the temporary wife situation in her cold calculations. She had been right about the temporary nature of my marriage to Daniel, though not in the way she had intended. But she had been profoundly wrong about me being merely a situation to be managed and discarded. The secured phone rang once more, Agent Vega with a final update for the day. "Good news, Mrs. Mitchell. Alexander Novak has been apprehended attempting to book passage on a cargo ship leaving port in Baltimore. All identified threats are now in custody." With that simple communication, the last piece of immediate danger was neutralized. What remained was the longer process of legal proceedings, financial resolutions, and personal healing, all challenges I now felt fully equipped to navigate. "Thank you, Agent Vega," I replied, genuine gratitude in my voice, "for everything." After ending the call, I rejoined Kate in the living room, sharing the latest development. "So it's really over," she said, visible relief washing over her. Features: the Mitchells, their schemes, their hired thugs, all contained. "The immediate threat is over," I corrected gently. "The legal process is just beginning. There will be trials, testimony, ongoing financial investigations." "But you're safe," Kate insisted, focusing on what mattered most to her. "And you're whole, financially, professionally, emotionally, despite everything they tried to take from you." 3 months after the arraignments, I stood at the back of Federal Courtroom C, watching as Daniel entered for his sentencing hearing. The intervening months had brought negotiated plea agreements for both Mitchells, Daniel accepting responsibility for bankruptcy fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges in exchange for testimony against Caroline. Caroline eventually pleading guilty to broader charges, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping once the evidence became overwhelming. Today would bring formal closure to Daniel's legal proceedings, with Caroline's sentencing scheduled for the following week. I had prepared a victim impact statement with Olivia's help, balancing personal experience with factual clarity. Judge Harmon presided, her stern demeanor unchanged since our first court appearance. The gallery was filled with financial journalists, legal observers, and even a few former colleagues from Garfield Investments. Daniel's attorney presented a final argument for leniency based on cooperation, while Torres outlined the government's position that significant incarceration remained appropriate despite that cooperation. When invited to address the court, Daniel turned slightly toward where I sat. "I want to apologize to Rebecca," he began, his broadcaster's voice subdued. "What began as financial planning became something inexcusable. I betrayed your trust and our marriage. While I can't undo that harm, I hope my cooperation has demonstrated some acceptance of responsibility." The carefully crafted statement rang hollow against the documented reality of years of calculated planning, the continued deceptions even after discovery, and the escalation to potential violence when exposure loomed. Judge Harmon's expression suggested similar skepticism. When my turn came to speak, I approached the podium calmly, the statement I had prepared now set aside in favor of something more direct. "Your Honor, I've spent considerable time contemplating appropriate words for today. Initially, I focused on the financial and emotional impact of discovering a 12-year marriage had been, in part, an elaborate setup for my eventual devastation. But ultimately, this case transcends personal betrayal." I paused, looking directly at Daniel. What the court is addressing today is the deliberate weaponization of financial systems against vulnerable individuals, a methodical attempt to use legal mechanisms like bankruptcy to execute fraud, followed by increasingly desperate criminal actions when that fraud was exposed. Judge Harmon nodded slightly, encouraging me to continue. The most appropriate outcome isn't measured by my personal closure, but by the protection of others who might face similar schemes without the financial expertise or resources I fortunately possessed. Daniel and Caroline Mitchell believed themselves exempt from consequences, capable of manipulating both intimate relationships and legal systems for personal gain. Their sentencing should reflect not just the harm attempted against me, but the threat such behavior poses to foundational social and financial trust. As I returned to my seat, Daniel's expression revealed a flicker of genuine emotion, perhaps recognition that I had transcended the role of victim he had assigned me, becoming instead an advocate for systemic accountability. Judge Harmon's sentencing decision came after brief deliberation. 18 years in federal prison for Daniel, with eligibility for parole after serving 12 years. The sentence exceeded prosecutors' recommendation by 3 years, with the judge specifically citing the calculated nature of the scheme and its escalation to potential violence when initially discovered. As Daniel was led away, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. In that moment, something unspoken passed between us. A final acknowledgement that the life we had shared had ended not with his careful planning, but with my unexpected strength. Outside the courthouse, with proceedings concluded, I delivered a brief statement to waiting reporters. Today's sentence appropriately addresses the serious nature of these crimes. I'm grateful to federal prosecutors, investigators, and the minor court for their diligence in this complex case. I look forward to focusing my energy now on preventing similar financial abuse through education and advocacy. 2 weeks later, with Caroline sentenced to 22 years and the immediate legal proceedings concluded, I officially accepted 2 positions that would define my professional future. Visiting lecturer in forensic accounting at MIT's Sloan School and founding director of the newly established Financial Justice Initiative, funded through a combination of my own resources and institutional support from several Boston financial firms, including, ironically, Garfield Investments. The foundation's mission, providing education, resources, and legal assistance to individuals facing potential financial abuse in relationship contexts, transformed my personal experience into systemic change. Within its first year, we would assist over 200 clients, publish accessible guides to financial self-protection, and begin developing curriculum for financial literacy programs nationwide. My personal life evolved with similar purpose. I sold the Back Bay condominium, purchasing instead a Victorian home in Cambridge closer to MIT, where I established a peaceful new beginning. Kate and her family visited regularly, our bond strengthened through shared adversity. I even developed an unexpected professional friendship with Vanessa Palmer, who became an occasional guest lecturer in my courses, offering perspective on how easily one could become entangled in financial fraud schemes. On the anniversary of discovering those bankruptcy papers on my kitchen island, I hosted a small dinner gathering. Olivia, Marcus, Kate, and a few close friends who had supported me throughout the ordeal. As we raised glasses in a toast, I reflected on the profound transformation of the past year. To justice, resilience, and unexpected new beginnings, I offered. And to the financial advisor who outsmarted them all, Olivia added with a smile. The Mitchell scheme, designed to leave me destitute and broken, had instead revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed and created opportunities I might never have pursued otherwise. In attempting to destroy me, Daniel and Caroline had inadvertently helped me discover my greatest purpose, protecting others from experiencing what I had nearly suffered and transforming personal betrayal into public good. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.